Welcome to Education in Focus. I'm your host, Eliana Kernodle. Today, we're talking about ballooning costs in Chicago public schools. And by that, I mean literally the cost of balloons. Joining me to tell us more is Chalkboard News editor Brendan Clary. Brendan, how much does Chicago public schools spend on balloons?
Yeah, Eliana, that's a great question. It really kind of depends on what year you're talking about, and because it's grown in recent years. So over the last 5 fiscal years, and that goes back to, I believe, July of 2019, they spent over $500,000 on balloons, right? So $600,593 on balloons. So like that's like the more specific total. It's over $500,000 on balloons, and in 2023. They spent over $278,000. So these are not insignificant amounts of money. And the thing is too, like this has grown a lot over time. So in 2020, the district spent $23,000 toward balloons. And then 2022, they spent 2021, they spent $49,000. And then in 2022, they spent $92,000. And during some of that time too, as you remember, like Chicago public schools was remote or like virtual. So some of that spending, it kind of trended up, even though students were not in the classroom. That 2021 year, it was higher. And then in 2022, maybe it was like a welcome back sort of thing, $92,000. And then the next year, it was $278,000. So that was the 2023 fiscal year. Currently, it's $142,000. So for this current fiscal year, which ends in June, I believe. So fiscal years go from like July to June, if I'm understanding it correctly, if I'm remembering that correctly. So that's $278,000 last year. That's $142,000 this year. So that's been, a lot of the spend has happened fairly recently, and it's it's a large school district. So that's another thing to keep in mind is this is not a rural school district in the middle of nowhere. They have a lot of different schools. They have a lot of different kind of functions like this. And, it's one of the nation's largest school districts still. So that's something to keep in mind when you're sort of thinking about this. But, that's just what their supplier payment data. So this is all from Chicago Public Schools. You can go on their website and look up different providers, and you can search balloon, and anybody with balloon in the name will come up, or you can search decor or some of those like design, those different kinds of things, and those will bring up the vendors. So there could be a couple, if they didn't have balloon in their name, there could be some that were not missing. This might not be the entire extent of the balloon spending, but it's at least a start, right? Of this, these are balloon vendors that we verified, we looked up on their social media or other ways, and if we couldn't verify that, then we didn't include them. For example, there was one that was it had balloon in the name, but if you looked it up, it was like kind of related to a different company that did like party rentals. So, if you had like a big blow up slide, that kind of thing. And again, if there was like a big block party, last day of school, that kind of thing, it kind of runs in line with maybe some of the program activities of the Chicago Public Schools, but it's just kind of something to be aware of.
And so far this year, it sounds like it's about half as much as last year, but I guess with the end of the year still coming up, there's probably going to be more spending in this area with end of school functions and graduations, things like that. So maybe it's too soon to say that they spent less this year.
Yeah, I think so. And I'm not exactly sure how they tally up the payments too. So like, I don't know if those can be sort of retroactive. And so, they haven't, like if reimbursements or like requests for reimbursement haven't been submitted yet, or like different kinds of things haven't been processed. So there could be a lag there, and we might not see that until the fall, right, of this was going on. So I'm not sure exactly what the reporting mechanisms are, how updated the supplier payment website information is, that kind of data. So yeah, I'm not sure exactly. I think we'll kind of have to follow up and see, how that spending kind of plays out over time as well. But you're right. There's a lot of graduations, different kinds of events as school comes to a close, different awards ceremony. And those are all have potential for balloon spending.
Yeah, let's get into that a little bit. What were some of the examples of the specific sorts of events that they were spending this money on balloons for?
Yeah, so that's a great question. There's a lot of different events that even on the Chicago Public Schools Facebook page, you can kind of find different balloon displays. So if you go onto their Facebook profile and you look up their photos, you can go through and see the different kinds of events in which, they have like a big balloon arch or like a big balloon wall, like a background and that kind of thing. And so some of them were for student award ceremonies, different kinds of, sort of public, like we're going to honor our students. And other times, though, it was like a mental health summit for teachers or for staff. In one case, there's like a Christmas party sort of thing where they had students who were performing in a hallway and, have like a big balloon arch and it's red and green. So there's a number of different kinds of things. So another one too was like a CPS champion celebration last November. So, and that had like a big CPS champions like made out of balloons and, like a big balloon, like a sort of photo background, right? Where students could stand in front of that and, get their picture taken with, the top CPS administrators, right? So it's like kind of one of those bigger deal things, and they can have like this big balloon wall. But also for Black History Month, there was another one, like a vendor, Marie's Balloons, that had showed like an elaborate balloon arch. And so this is, one of the vendors for listed on the Chicago Public Schools vendor page, right? And so there's like several different balloons. So they're saying this is what we've done. And so that was some of these elaborate balloon displays. And there's variations in what these vendors offer too. So, there's different there's those big arches, like photo backgrounds. There's also like sculptures or like different kinds of like columns, they're called, I think, where you have like a balloon sort of like stacked up in a little like decorative kind of pillar to put around in in a room and that kind of thing. So there's a wide range of stuff. Oh, and the Chicago Public Schools, they have a back to school parade float. There's one vendor who helps with the balloons with that. So it's like, a lot of different kinds of venues, different kinds of like varieties of balloon decoration.
So you found a lot of the information for this piece by looking at the vendors who provided these balloons. Can you tell us a little bit more about who these vendors are and what sorts of things you learned about them?
Yeah, absolutely. So, what I did is looked up those, balloons in the Chicago Public Schools, vendor payment system. So then it shows, who which companies these are and how much they spent each fiscal year. And so I, found different suppliers like Balloons by Frenchie, Balloons for Everything, Ooh Balloons, which is like OOO Balloons, Board for Balloons, Brown Sugar's Balloon Designs and Academy, JoJo the Balloon, and Flower Lady. So, I mean, these are just like some of them, the Balloon Queens. And these are vendors who are, they're trying to make it, just like they're small businesses, I think, generally, or maybe trying to grow and expand. They say they offer services like event planning, floral arrangements, different kinds of things. So that's where the trouble is. I can't, we can see on the Chicago Public Schools Facebook page that they have balloon displays and that kind of thing. But there's also these other services that might be rendered as well. And I think it'd be less likely, but they don't have specific details on those payment information. So that's generally what these businesses are. They're trying to make it. And some of them, however, have sort of leaned into, the cottage industry with Chicago Public Schools vendors, and they will proudly display we're an approved vendor, you can use us. And one in particular, it was really interesting, said, we're not taking any other work except for Chicago Public Schools, where our orders are accepted only from CPS and local schools. And that was got $65,000 worth of business in 2023, and then $28,000 so far in the current fiscal year. And so again, that's one of those things where you can see how much they got. We can't see exactly what for, but that was Marie's Balloons. So they're the ones who did the big balloon arch for Black History Month, and the parade float and everything else too. So some of these businesses, they work only for Chicago Public Schools at this point, or probably at different times of the year. They can accept maybe other jobs, but they're mainly supported by Chicago Public Schools.
Well, we only have a little bit of time left, but everyone loves a good balloon display, but with kind of ongoing funding questions, union negotiation, things like that, it does raise the question, what is the financial state of Chicago Public Schools, and can they afford to be spending this much money on balloons?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, Chicago Public Schools is, as you mentioned, they have there's going to have a long list of, demands. And I think that they spend, I think, almost $30,000 per student in terms of how they are, in terms of the money that they get. And how many students they have. And so if you're thinking about it that way, it's about $30,000 per student, and the proficiencies in terms of test scores are low. I mean, they're I think kind of back on the mend after COVID, but compared to other large school districts, I think that critics could say, hey, this is not enough per student. Like, you're getting $30,000 per student, and we're not seeing that benefit in terms of what students are learning and how they're doing on these standardized test scores, and their academic achievement is lower, and they can raise those kinds of questions. I mean, the truth is, with a school district this size, $500,000 over 5 years it's not nothing, but it's still, it is a small amount compared to like how much money they're talking, billions of dollars, and even how much money the Chicago Teachers Union is asking. But, that's, we don't have to, make the call. That's like what Chalkboard News is all about, is just like saying this is this is what taxpayers are paying for, right? And this is up to them to sort of advocate and to know, this is where their money is going.
Well, Brendan, thank you for your insights on this story. Listeners can keep up with this story and more at chalkboardnews.com.
Are you tired of news that puts politics over people? At the nonprofit Franklin News Foundation, we believe in putting people over politics by delivering nonpartisan news and audio content that serves you, the American taxpayer. With Franklin News Foundation, you can read fact-based, state-focused news for free at thecentersquare.com. You can listen to civil, balanced conversations between policy experts through our podcast network at americastalking.com. Or you can get in-depth news on K-12 education spending, curriculum, and school safety at chalkboardnews.com. It's all free through Franklin, where we put you, the American taxpayer, first in every story, episode, and conversation. And it's only possible through our supporters. Together, we can produce content that puts people over politics and brings Americans the news they deserve. Become a supporter today at franklinnews.org/donate. Once again, that's franklinnews.org/donate.